Most dangerous thing he did was sneeze near an open flame. The ruins ahead looked like someone had taken a temple, shaken it really hard, and then left it to marinate in sand and regret for about 500 years. Columns jutted out at angles that made architects weep. Walls stood where they had no business standing, and in the center of it all, chained to a stone pillar that had somehow survived when nothing else had, was an orc. Not just any orc. An orc who was still alive. Lucian stopped walking, stared, recalibrated his entire understanding of how the universe worked, because orcs didn't end up chained in the middle of deserts. Orcs were the ones doing the chaining. They were the nightmare that mothers used to scare children into eating their vegetables. 7 feet of muscle, rage, and tactical violence wrapped in green skin and bad attitudes. They didn't get captured. They captured. They didn't get left to die. They left others to die. And yet, there she was. Green skin blistered and peeling from days under the merciless sun. Black hair matted with sand and dried blood. Armor that had once been impressive now looked like it had been through a war and lost. 3 chains bound her to the pillar, thick, ancient chains that glowed faintly with runes Lucian recognized from his studies. Not human work, orc craftsmanship, which meant one very specific thing. This wasn't a human execution. This was orc justice, or orc politics. Same difference, really. The orc's eyes were closed. For a moment, Lucian thought she might be dead. Then her chest moved. Barely. The kind of breath that said the body was still fighting even when the mind had given up. He should leave. He should absolutely leave. Every survival instinct he'd developed over 32 years of questionable life choices was screaming at him to turn around and walk away. Nothing good ever came from getting involved in orc business. Nothing. But Lucian had one fatal flaw. Worse than greed. Worse than pride. Worse even than his tendency to talk to himself when he was nervous. He was curious. And curiosity, as his mother used to say before she stopped saying anything at all, was just a fancy word for stupid with better publicity. He approached slowly. The chains were anchored to the pillar by 3 locks. Complex mechanisms that looked like someone had taken a puzzle, made it angry, and then given it the ability to ruin your day. The kind of locks that took years to master. The kind that couldn't be broken by force, only by knowledge. Lucian knelt by the first lock, pulled out his tools. The metal was hot enough to brand cattle. He wrapped his hand in cloth and got to work. The first lock took 20 minutes. The second took 35. By the time he reached the third, sweat was dripping into his eyes, and his hands were shaking from exhaustion and heat. But he'd spent 15 years learning his craft. 15 years studying mechanisms that most people didn't even know existed. And this lock, as complex as it was, still followed rules, still had logic, still had a solution. Click. The third chain fell away. The orc's eyes opened. They were gold. Not brown, not amber, but actual gold. The color of coins in sunlight, of wheat fields in autumn, of things precious and rare. And they were looking at him with an expression that Lucian couldn't quite place. Not gratitude. Not relief. Something harder. Something that made him very aware that he was kneeling in front of a being who could break his spine with one hand, and probably wouldn't lose much sleep over it. Her voice came out like gravel scraping against stone. "You're human." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Guilty," Lucian said. "Also, you're welcome." The orc pushed herself up, slowly, like someone who'd been holding the same position for so long that her body had forgotten other options existed. She was shorter than most orcs he'd seen, maybe 5'9", but that didn't make her any less intimidating. Especially when she looked at him with those gold eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone straight to the part of him that made stupid decisions. "You broke the chains of shame," she said. "I broke some chains," Lucian corrected. Whether they had a name or not wasn't really my concern. They had a name. She reached down and picked up the broken lock from the third chain, held it in her palm like it weighed more than metal should. They were placed by my own people, rival clans who feared what I represent. What I could become, which is the next warlord of the Eastern Territories. She looked at the lock, then at him. "My name is Gurza Ironfang, daughter of Corval Ironfang, heir to the bloodied throne. And you, human, have just created a problem." Lucian stood up, brushed sand off his knees. "I usually charge extra for problems. By orc law, I owe you a blood debt. You saved my life. That debt must be repaid." She said it like someone explaining a funeral. There is no greater shame than dying with honor unpaid, and there is no greater honor than granting a reward worthy of the deed. So, give me some gold and we're good. The look she gave him could have stripped paint. Gold. You think an heiress's life is worth gold? You think 4 days chained under the sun, left to die by cowards who couldn't face me in combat, is worth coins? I mean, depending on how many coins. What is your name, human? Lucian Cordwell. Lucian Cordwell. She tested the name, like she was trying to figure out if it was real or something he'd made up on the spot. You will come with me to my father's stronghold. You will state your claim before the clan elders, and you will receive a reward befitting the magnitude of your deed. She paused. This is not negotiable. What if I don't want a reward? Then you insult me further, and insulting an orc heiress. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Let's just say that refusing honor is a faster way to die than the sun. Lucian looked around at the endless desert, then back at the orc who was currently holding a broken lock like it was evidence in a trial, then up at the sky where the sun was still very much interested in killing anything that stayed too long. You know what? He said. I've had worse weeks. Lead the way. Trigger. The journey to the orc stronghold took 2 days. 2 days of walking through terrain that seemed personally offended by the concept of shade. 2 days of Gurza barely speaking except to tell him when to stop, when to drink, when to keep moving. 2 days of Lucian trying very hard not to think about what exactly he was walking toward. Orc strongholds weren't known for their hospitality. They were known for their walls built from the bones of enemies, their floors stained with the blood of challengers, and their general atmosphere of enter at your own risk and leave in pieces. But as they crested the final dune and the stronghold came into view, Lucian had to admit it was impressive. Massive stone walls that looked like they'd been carved from the mountains themselves. Banners that caught the wind and snapped with the sound of controlled violence. Guard towers where orcs stood watch with the kind of attention that said they took their jobs very seriously and probably won awards for it. And everywhere were orcs. Big orcs, small orcs, orcs in armor, orcs in simple leather, orcs sharpening weapons, orcs arguing, orcs laughing, orcs training young orcs who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else, but were too scared to say so. They stopped at the gates. The guards took one look at Gurza and immediately stood straighter. One of them, a massive orc with a scar that ran from his forehead to his jaw, stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. Heiress, he breathed. We thought, Vorgath said you were. Vorgath says many things. Gurza cut him off. Most of them are lies wrapped in cowardice. Where is my father? The Great Hall. There's a council meeting about your succession. They're deciding. He stopped, looked at Lucian. Is that a human? This human has a name, Lucian said pleasantly. And yes, I know I'm in an orc stronghold. I'm aware this is unusual. I'm having a very strange week. Thank you for noticing. Gurza didn't wait for more questions. She walked through the gates like she owned them, which, technically, she probably would someday. Lucian followed, very aware of the dozens of golden eyes tracking his every movement. The crowd of orcs parted as they passed. Whispers followed them like smoke. Is that Gurza? She's alive. Who's the human? Why is she carrying that lock? The great hall was exactly what it sounded like. Great. High ceilings supported by columns carved with battle scenes. Torches that cast everything in warm orange light. A massive throne at the far end, made from what Lucian hoped was just decorative metal and not actual weaponry from fallen enemies. And seated on that throne, wearing more scars than most people wear clothes, was Warlord Corval Ironfang. He was huge. Not tall huge, mountain huge, the kind of huge that made you reconsider your understanding of anatomy. His armor was simple but effective, dark metal that had seen enough battles to have stories of its own. Around his neck hung a collar made of teeth, 23 teeth to be exact. Lucian knew because he counted them. It seemed like important information. Around the throne stood a circle of orc elders, warriors, advisors, and in their midst, standing with the kind of confidence that only came from either bravery or stupidity, was another orc, younger than Corval, tall, well-armed, and currently talking. Clear that Gurza has failed to return, the orc was saying. His voice carried easily through the hall. By our law, an heir who cannot defend themselves is no heir at all. I propose that the succession Vorgath. One word, Gurza's voice. The entire hall went silent. The orc, Vorgath, turned. His face went through several expressions very quickly. Surprise, fear, anger, then something that looked like calculation. When he smiled, it came just a fraction too late. There it was, the laugh before he spoke. The tell, heiress, he said smoothly. You've returned. How? Unexpected. Is it? Gurza walked forward, slow, deliberate, every step measured. Unexpected implies chance. Implies that something occurred which couldn't be predicted. But I think we both know exactly what you expected, Vorgath. You expected me to die chained in the wastes of sorrow. Alone. Forgotten. Leaving the path to succession conveniently empty. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. She held up the broken lock. This is the third chain of shame. The one that took you 3 months to commission from the Rust Iron clan. The one that no orc could break without the key. The one you made sure was locked last. She threw it at his feet. Tell me, Vorgath, where did you put the key? The hall was so quiet you could hear breathing. Heavy, controlled breathing of dozens of orcs all watching to see what happened next. Vorgath's laugh came again. Nervous, high-pitched. You have no proof? I have this. Gurza gestured to herself. I'm alive. I'm here. And I brought the one being who could do what no orc warrior could. Solve what brute force never would. She turned and looked at Lucian. This human broke chains that were meant to be permanent. He freed me when I had days left to live. By our oldest laws, I owe him a blood debt, and I intend to pay it before this entire clan. Corval stood from his throne. When he moved, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He walked down the steps with the confidence of someone who'd won more fights than most people had seen. His gold eyes, the same color as his daughter's, swept over Gurza, then Lucian, then back to Gurza. My daughter, he said. His voice was deep enough to rattle ribs. I was told you were dead. You were lied to. So I see. He looked at Vorgath. We will discuss your information later, privately. The way he said privately made it sound like a death sentence wrapped in courtesy. Then he turned to Lucian. Human, you freed my heir. I did, Lucian said. Though, to be fair, I was mostly there for an artifact that doesn't exist. The whole freeing an orc princess thing was unplanned. A ripple of something went through the crowd. It might have been laughter, or outrage. Hard to tell with orcs. Corval's expression didn't change. My daughter says you are owed a blood debt. This is true. By our laws you must name your reward, and by our honor, we must grant it, if it is within our power. He paused. What do you want, Lucian Cordwell? This was it. The moment where he was supposed to have thought about this. The moment where he should have had a plan. The moment where any sane person would have asked for gold, supplies, and a fast horse to get far away from orc politics. But Lucian looked at Gurza, at the way she stood, proud despite the blistered skin and dried blood, at the way she held herself like someone who'd spent 4 days dying and refused to admit it, at the broken lock that she'd carried for 2 days because it meant something, in ways he was only beginning to understand. And he made a decision. The kind of decision his mother would have called stupid. The kind of decision that changes everything. I want, he said slowly, to learn why an orc heiress was left to die by her own people. I want to understand what kind of world makes that possible, and I want to help make sure it doesn't happen again. The hall erupted. Orcs arguing, shouting, some in agreement, most in outrage. A human asking to understand orc ways. A human thinking he could help. A human who clearly didn't know his place. But Corval raised one hand. The hall went silent again. You ask for knowledge, the warlord said. For understanding. For purpose. He studied Lucian like he was a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Most humans ask for gold. For power. For things that can be measured and spent. You ask for things that cannot be bought. Gold won't stop Gurza from being chained again, Lucian said. Power won't change why it happened. But understanding might. And if I'm owed a debt of honor, then I want my reward to actually mean something. Gurza was staring at him. Really staring. Like she was seeing him for the first time. Corval walked closer. Close enough that Lucian could see every scar, every line, every year of battles won and lost. You are either very brave or very stupid. I've been told it's both. Lucian admitted, often by the same people in the same sentence. Something that might have been respect flickered in Corval's eyes. Very well. Your reward is granted. You will stay in our stronghold. You will learn our ways, and you will have the protection of the Iron Fang clan. He turned to the crowd. Let it be known, Lucian Cordwell is under our hospitality. Any harm that comes to him will be answered by me personally. The way he said personally made it very clear that no one wanted to find out what that meant. But, Corval continued, looking back at Lucian, you should know what you have agreed to. To understand us is to see things your people would rather ignore. To help us is to make enemies of those who profit from our division. And to stay here, he glanced at Gurza, to stay here is to become part of something larger than yourself. Are you certain this is what you want? Lucian thought about his plan to retire, about the shop he'd never buy, about the cat he'd never own, about the boring life he'd convinced himself he wanted. I'm certain I want to try, he said. Corval nodded once. Then welcome to the Iron Fang clan, Lucian Cordwell. Try not to die. We've had enough death this season. And the room they gave Lucian was small but functional. Stone walls, simple bed, a window that looked out over the training grounds where young orcs were currently learning how to hurt each other efficiently. It was, by all accounts, perfectly adequate. It was also the most terrifying place Lucian had ever slept, because sleeping in an orc stronghold meant trusting that the hospitality laws would hold, that no one would decide he was better off dead, that Corval's protection actually meant something. And while logically Lucian understood that orcs took their laws seriously, there was still a small part of his brain that stayed awake all night waiting for an axe through the door. The axe never came. Instead, morning brought something worse. A knock. Gurza entered without waiting for permission. She looked better than she had yesterday. Clean armor, braided hair, skin that had been treated for burns. But the broken lock was still attached to her belt. She caught him looking at it. In orc tradition, she said, a debt holder carries the symbol of their shame until it is fully paid. This lock reminds me that I was weak, that I was captured, that I needed help. She sat down on the single chair like she owned it. It also reminds me that you chose a very strange reward. I have a tendency to do that. Most humans would have asked for gold, for weapons, for passage out of orc territory with enough supplies to never return. Most humans probably aren't stupid enough to be in orc territory in the first place, Lucian pointed out. She smiled. It was a real smile this time, small, but genuine. True, which makes you either remarkably brave or, I know, remarkably stupid. Your father already covered this. My father is a good judge of character. If he gave you hospitality, it means he sees something worth protecting. But you should know. She leaned forward. What you asked for. Understanding, change, preventing what happened to me from happening again. That's not a simple request. That's revolution wrapped in polite words. Is it? There are orcs in this stronghold who believe might makes right, who believe that if I was weak enough to be captured, I don't deserve to lead. Vorgath is one of them, but he's not alone. She touched the lock. For generations we've solved our problems with strength, with violence, with blood. The idea that knowledge could be stronger than muscle, that a human could offer something an orc warrior cannot. It threatens everything they believe. And what do you believe? Gurza was quiet for a long moment. I believe that I spent 4 days chained in the sun waiting to die. And I believe that every orc warrior who passed through those ruins could have freed me if they'd bothered to try, if they'd valued knowledge over pride, if they'd seen chains as a problem to solve rather than proof of weakness. She looked at him. You solved in 1 hour what none of them could do in 4 days. That says something about the world we've built. And what it says isn't flattering. So what do we do about it? We? She raised an eyebrow. You plan to stay? Your father granted my reward. I asked for understanding and the chance to help. Running away now would be insulting. Lucian paused. Also, I'm genuinely curious. You're an orc heiress who was betrayed by your own people. I'm a human locksmith who got hired for a fake job and ended up in the middle of orc politics. If this were a song, it would be a really weird one. I want to see how it ends. Songs about humans and orcs usually end with one side dead. Then let's write a different kind of song. Gurza studied him, really studied him, like she was trying to figure out if he was serious or just insane. Finally, she stood. Tonight there's a feast, to celebrate my return. You'll be there as my honored guest. Try not to say anything that gets you killed. I make no promises. I noticed. She walked to the door, stopped. Lucian? Yeah? Thank you. For the chains. For choosing a reward that matters. For being stupid enough to care. She touched the lock one more time. No one's done that before. Then she was gone. And Lucian was left alone in a room in an orc stronghold, wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into and whether it was too late to take the gold instead. The feast was exactly as intimidating as Lucian expected. Long tables filled with more food than seemed physically possible. Orcs eating, drinking, laughing, arguing, and occasionally settling disagreements with arm wrestling matches that made the table creak in protest. The noise level was somewhere between busy marketplace and natural disaster. Lucian sat next to Gurza at the head table. Corval was on her other side, watching the crowd with the attention of someone who'd seen too many peaceful dinners turn violent. The broken lock sat on the table between them, a silent reminder of why they were all here. You're not eating, Gurza observed. I'm trying to figure out if I should be nervous or terrified. Both. It's a feast. She pushed a plate toward him. The meat is from a razorback boar. Very tender. Won't kill you. Probably. Probably isn't as reassuring as you think it is. Corval leaned over. The human is wise to be cautious. Orc food is made for orc stomachs. But we made sure tonight's meal is safe for your delicate constitution. The way he said delicate made it clear what he thought of human digestive systems. Much appreciated, Lucian said dryly. He took a bite. It was actually good. Spicy, but good. So, when does the ritual combat start? Gurza blinked. What? The combat, the duels. The part where someone challenges someone else and they fight to prove honor or settle disputes or whatever reason orcs use for hitting each other. How do you know about ritual combat? I read. A lot. It's what you do when you spend 15 years learning about locks and mechanisms. You read the books that happen to be nearby. Some of them were about orc culture. He took another bite. Though I'll admit, most of what I know comes from drunk merchants telling stories in taverns. So my information might be selective. Corval actually laughed. It was a sound like rocks avalanching. Selective. Yes. Humans love to tell stories about how we solve everything with violence. They forget to mention the other parts. Like what? Like how we value loyalty above all else. Like how betrayal is a worse crime than murder because murder is honest. It doesn't hide what it is. Like how we believe that honor isn't about being strong. It's about keeping your word even when breaking it would be easier. He gestured to the crowd. These orcs aren't just warriors. They're farmers, craftsmen, parents, teachers. They build, they create. They love their families just like humans do. But that doesn't make for exciting tavern stories. Lucian looked around. Really looked. And Corval was right. Yes, there were weapons. Yes, there was roughness. But there was also laughter. Children running between tables playing tag. An older orc carefully teaching a younger one how to carve wood. Two orcs in the corner arguing passionately about something that involved a lot of hand gestures and zero actual violence. They were people. Just green. I apologize, Lucian said quietly, for assuming. Most humans assume. Corval replied. Few apologize. You're already doing better than expected. He raised his cup. Two unexpected humans who break chains and ask difficult questions. Gurza raised her cup too. To stupid bravery. I feel like I'm being insulted and complimented at the same time. Welcome to orc culture, Gurza said with a grin. They drank. The liquid burned going down. Some kind of orc brew that tasted like liquid courage mixed with regret. But it was warm, and the hall was loud. And for just a moment, Lucian felt something he hadn't expected to feel in an orc stronghold. Safe. Then Vorgath stood up. He was across the hall, surrounded by a group of orcs who all had the same look. Young, ambitious, hungry for something they didn't have yet. Vorgath raised his cup high. The hall gradually quieted. A toast, he said. His voice carried, smooth, practiced, to Harris Gurza, who survived the unsurvivable, who returned when we thought her lost, who proved that she is stronger than the chains meant to hold her. It sounded like a compliment. It felt like a knife wrapped in silk. And to her companion. Vorgath's golden eyes found Lucian, the human who freed her, who asked not for gold but for understanding. A noble goal. He paused, let the silence stretch. Though I wonder, can a human truly understand orc ways? Can someone who has never felt the weight of a warrior's duty truly grasp what it means to lead? Can an outsider judge what is best for people they will never truly be part of? The hall was silent, every orc watching, waiting. Gurza's hand moved toward the lock on her belt, but Lucian spoke first. "You're right," he said. Vorgath blinked. "What?" "You're right. I can't fully understand orc ways. I wasn't raised in a warrior culture. I don't know what it's like to earn respect through combat. I'm an outsider." Lucian stood. "But here's what I do understand. Locks, mechanisms, puzzles, things that seem impossible until you figure out how they work. And you know what I learned about the chains of shame?" He picked up the broken lock from the table, held it up so everyone could see. "These weren't made to be broken by strength. They were designed specifically to defeat it. The harder you pull, the tighter they lock. The more force you use, the more they resist. It's genius, really. A lock that uses a warrior's greatest strength against them." He turned the lock over in his hands. "But there's a weakness. There's always a weakness. You just have to look for it. You have to think differently. You have to value knowledge over muscle. And that," he looked directly at Vorgath, "that's something anyone can do. Orc or human, warrior or craftsman, leader or follower. The only requirement is being willing to try." He set the lock down. "So you're right. I don't fully understand your ways. But I understand that Gurza survived because someone thought differently, and maybe that's worth something, even if it comes from an outsider." The hall was silent. Then one orc started clapping. Slowly, then another, then more. Not everyone. Vorgath's group stayed silent, arms crossed, but enough that the sound filled the hall. Corval stood. "Well spoken, Lucian Cordwell. You have the mind of an engineer and the heart of someone too brave for their own good." He looked at Vorgath. "As for your concerns about outsiders, history is full of those who made great changes precisely because they were not bound by tradition. Perhaps that is exactly what we need." Vorgath's jaw tightened. His laugh came. Brief, bitter. "Of course, Warlord. I meant no disrespect." "Of course you didn't," Corval said in a tone that indicated he knew exactly what Vorgath meant. "Now sit. Eat. This is a feast, not a council meeting. Save your ambitious speeches for when they're appropriate." Vorgath sat, but his eyes never left Lucian, and Lucian realized something important. He'd just made a powerful enemy, an enemy who laughed before he lied, an enemy who'd already tried to kill Gurza once, an enemy who would definitely try again. And the days that followed fell into a pattern. Lucian spent mornings learning orc customs from Gurza, afternoons observing the stronghold's daily operations, evenings in the workshop where orc craftsmen created weapons, tools, and mechanisms with a precision that challenged everything humans said about orcs being primitive. He learned that orcs had 13 different words for honor, depending on context, that their battle songs were actually mathematical, rhythms that helped coordinate group tactics, that their brutish language was capable of poetry that made grown warriors cry. He learned that Gurza was supposed to face a trial of worthiness in 3 months, a test that would prove she was fit to eventually succeed her father, a test that Vorgath was also eligible for. And he learned that the broken lock Gurza carried wasn't just a symbol of debt, it was a reminder, a weight she carried every day because orc tradition demanded it. Until the debt was paid, until honor was restored, she couldn't put it down, which meant she carried it during training, during meals, during every conversation and every decision, a constant physical reminder of shame that needed answering. One afternoon, Lucian found her on the battlements, staring out at the desert where she'd almost died. The lock was in her hands. She was turning it over and over, like if she looked at it long enough, it would make sense. "Does it get lighter?" he asked. She didn't turn around. "No, it gets heavier. Every day I carry it is another day I haven't fulfilled my obligation. Another day the debt grows. I didn't ask for the debt. I know. But orc law doesn't care what you asked for. It cares about what happened. You saved my life. I owe you. That's reality." She finally looked at him. "The trial is coming. In 3 months, I have to prove I'm worthy to lead, and Vorgath will be there. He'll use everything, my capture, my weakness, the fact that a human had to save me, to prove I'm not fit. Are you worried?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Because he's right. I was captured. I was weak. I needed help. In orc culture, those are not qualities of leadership." In human culture, acknowledging weakness and accepting help are signs of wisdom. We are not humans. No, Lucian agreed. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe the rule that says accepting help is weakness is the same rule that let Vorgath chain you in the desert in the first place. Maybe strength isn't about doing everything alone. Maybe it's about knowing when to accept help and having the courage to ask for it. Gurza was quiet for a long time. If I say that at the trial, they'll laugh me off the platform. Then don't say it. Show it. Lucian gestured to the lock. You carry that as a symbol of debt. But what if you reframed it? What if it became a symbol of something else? Of growth, of learning, of being smart enough to value knowledge over pride. You're suggesting I turn my shame into my strength. I'm suggesting that shame and strength aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same thing. And maybe the strongest leaders are the ones who've known both. She looked at the lock, then at him. You're going to get yourself killed with philosophy like that. Probably. But until then, I'm going to keep saying what I think. It's kind of my thing. She laughed. Actually laughed. It was the first time he'd heard it. A sound like rocks rolling, but somehow musical. You're insane. I've been told. Usually by people who like me. I like you too, Lucian Cordwell. That's the problem. She attached the lock back to her belt. The trial will test more than strength. It tests judgment, decision-making, the ability to lead under pressure. And Vorgath has been preparing his whole life. I have 3 months. Then we have 3 months to make sure you're ready. We? You think I asked for understanding and the chance to help just to watch from the sidelines? I'm invested now. Besides, he grinned, I broke those chains once. I can help you break a few more. The metaphorical kind this time. Gurza studied him, then nodded. All right, we'll train. Together. But I warn you, orc training is not like human training. It will hurt. You will complain. And I will not go easy on you. I wouldn't expect anything less. Good. She turned to leave, then stopped. Lucian? Yeah? When this is over, the trial, the debt, all of it, what will you do? Will you stay? Or will you return to your human world? It was a question Lucian had been avoiding, because the answer terrified him. I don't know, he said honestly. Ask me again in 3 months. Ta dum. The 3 months passed in a blur of training, learning, and slowly earning the respect of orcs who'd initially seen him as nothing more than a curiosity. Lucian learned to fight. Not well, he'd never match an orc warrior, but well enough to hold his own. He learned strategy, tactics, the art of reading an opponent. But more importantly, he learned about Gurza, about the weight of expectation she carried, about the fear that she wasn't enough, about the love she had for her people despite their harsh laws and harsher traditions. And somewhere in those 3 months, something shifted. Training sessions became conversations. Conversations became moments. Moments became something neither of them wanted to name because naming it would make it real. And real meant dealing with consequences they weren't ready for. Because a human and an orc, that wasn't just unusual. That was forbidden. Orcs had laws about mixing bloodlines, traditions that went back centuries, expectations that crushed anyone who tried to break them. But here's the thing about laws. They only work if everyone agrees to follow them. The trial of worthiness arrived on a morning that was too clear, too bright, too perfect for what was about to happen. The entire clan gathered in the trial arena, a circular platform surrounded by seats carved into stone. Corval sat at the highest point, flanked by the clan elders. The 23 teeth around his neck caught the light. Gurza stood on one side of the platform, Vorgath on the other. Between them sat a series of challenges designed to test everything a leader needed. Strength, wisdom, courage, judgment. The first test was combat, expected, traditional. Both warriors fought with controlled fury, neither giving ground easily. It ended in a draw, both skilled, both capable. The crowd roared approval. The second test was strategy, a war game played on a map with pieces representing clans, resources, enemies. Gurza won, but barely. Vorgath's tactics were aggressive but effective. The elders nodded, impressed by both. The third test was judgment, a moral dilemma presented before the entire clan. A warrior had betrayed secrets to an enemy but saved civilian lives in doing so. Execution or exile. Vorgath argued for execution. Betrayal demanded the harshest punishment. Anything less showed weakness. Gurza argued for exile. The warrior had made a terrible choice, but for the right reasons. Leadership meant understanding context. The elders were split. The crowd was split. It came down to Corval's deciding vote. He chose neither. Both answers have merit, the warlord said. Both show understanding of our laws. But what matters is not the answer, it's the reasoning. Vorgath sees laws as absolute. Gurza sees laws as guides. Both are necessary. Both are dangerous alone. He stood. There is one final test. One I have not announced, because it tests something deeper than combat or strategy or judgment. It tests character. He gestured to Lucian. Approach. Lucian's stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to involve him. But he walked onto the platform. Every orc eye watching him, judging him, wondering what role a human could possibly play in an orc trial. Corval picked up the broken lock from where Gurza had set it aside for the trial. This lock represents many things: shame, debt, weakness, strength, knowledge, pride. He held it out to Gurza. I ask you now, before this entire clan, how do you pay a debt that cannot be measured in gold or blood? How do you honor someone who wants neither reward nor recognition but simply understanding? Gurza looked at the lock, then at Lucian, then at her father. I can't, she said quietly, because some debts can't be paid, some honors can't be measured, some bonds. She took the lock. Some bonds transcend what our laws account for. Explain, Corval commanded. Lucian freed me from chains. But more than that, he freed me from thinking that strength was the only answer. He showed me that knowledge matters, that outsiders can offer perspective we lack, that admitting weakness and accepting help isn't shameful, it's wise. She turned to face the crowd. I was raised to believe that leaders must be invincible, that showing vulnerability is failure. But I was wrong. The strongest leaders are those who know their limits and surround themselves with people who complement their weaknesses. She held up the lock. I carry this not as shame, but as a reminder that sometimes the problems we face cannot be solved by traditional means, that sometimes we need someone to think differently, to see what we cannot see, to break what we cannot break. And what of the debt? Corval pressed. The debt cannot be paid with a single reward. It can only be paid with a lifetime of honoring what Lucian taught me, by leading differently, by valuing all forms of strength, not just physical, by making sure no orc is ever left to die in chains because they didn't fit our narrow definition of worthy. She looked at Lucian, and if he'll accept it, by asking him to stay, to continue teaching me, to help build a clan that's stronger for its diversity, not weaker. The crowd erupted, some in approval, many in outrage. A human staying permanently, a human influencing leadership, a human and an orc working together as equals. Vorgath stepped forward. His laugh came before his words. This is madness. She asks us to change everything we are because of one human, one outsider who knows nothing of our true struggles. She was weak in chains, and she's weak now, weak enough to rely on others instead of standing alone as true leaders must. I am weak, Gurza said. The crowd went silent. I am weak at mechanisms, at locks, at certain kinds of strategy. I am weak at many things, and I'm strong enough to admit it, to seek help from those who have skills I lack. That's not weakness, Vorgath. That's wisdom. And if you can't see the difference, then you're not ready to lead. Corval raised his hand. The crowd quieted. Lucian Cordwell, you have heard my daughter's offer. You could take gold and leave. You could return to your human world. You could be free of orc politics and orc danger and orc complications. What do you choose? Lucian looked at Gurza, at the broken lock she held, at the future she was offering, a future that would be difficult, that would face opposition, that would challenge everything both their peoples believed. But it was also a future that mattered, that meant something. That was bigger than retirement and safety and boring predictability. I choose to stay, he said. I choose to help. I choose to see where this impossible thing leads. He smiled at Gurza. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't get chained to any more pillars. I've got a reputation to maintain. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even some of Vorgath's supporters cracked smiles. Corval nodded. Then my decision is made. Gurza has proven what true leadership requires. Not just strength, but wisdom. Not just pride, but humility. Not just tradition, but growth. She will be my heir, and Lucian Cordwell will be her advisor. Together they will forge something new, something that honors our past while building a better future. He looked at Vorgath. You are a skilled warrior, a cunning strategist, but you are not ready to lead. Perhaps one day, but not today. Vorgath's face went through several expressions: rage, humiliation, calculation. When he finally bowed, it was stiff, forced, as the warlord commands. But his eyes promised that this wasn't over. The celebration that night was smaller than the feast 3 months prior, more intimate. Gurza and Lucian sat on the battlements, away from the noise, watching the stars. The broken lock sat between them. "You know this won't be easy," Gurza said. "Vorgath won't accept defeat. Others will question my judgment. Some will call me traitor for bringing a human so close to leadership. I know. You'll face prejudice, hostility, maybe even violence. I know that too. And we can never—" She stopped, started again. "We can never be more than allies. The laws forbid it. The traditions forbid it. Even suggesting otherwise would destroy everything we're trying to build." Lucian was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? Something I learned from studying locks for 15 years? What? The strongest locks aren't the ones that can't be broken. They're the ones that protect what matters most while still allowing access to those who have the right key. The trick is figuring out who deserves that key." That's a terrible metaphor. I know. I'm not good at metaphors. I'm better at facts. So here's a fact. I care about you. About this. About what we're building. And if all we can ever be is allies, then I'll be the best ally you've ever had. But I'm not going to lie and say I don't wish we lived in a world where laws were different, where traditions were kinder, where green and not green didn't matter so much. Gurza picked up the lock. In Orc tradition, when a debt is considered paid, the symbol is destroyed, melted down, returned to raw material so it can become something new. "Is the debt paid?" "No," she said. "It never will be. Because you didn't just save my life. You changed how I think about everything. That's not a debt that gets paid. It's a debt that gets honored. Every day, for the rest of my life." She held the lock out to him. "Will you help me melt this down? Will you help me turn shame into something new?" Lucian took the lock. Their hands touched. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the warmth of skin against skin. Green against not green. "I'll help you turn it into whatever you want," he said. That's what allies do. They sat there as the stars wheeled overhead. Two people from two worlds that were never supposed to meet. Building something that would take years to complete. Fighting against traditions that had stood for centuries. Facing opposition from all sides. But they had time. They had purpose. They had each other. And sometimes, that was enough. 6 months later, the first human merchant entered the stronghold under official trade agreement. Gurza negotiated it personally, with Lucian advising on human customs and expectations. It went smoothly. Mostly. Only 2 fistfights and 1 accusation of cheating. By Orc standards, that was a diplomatic triumph. A year later, 3 Orc craftsmen apprenticed with human smiths in the nearest city. They learned techniques Orcs had never considered. They brought back knowledge that revolutionized weapon making. They also brought back a taste for human pastries, which Korval declared was the real victory. 2 years later, Gurza took her father's place as warlord. Lucian stood beside her as chief advisor. Some Orcs grumbled. Some humans were outraged. But the stronghold thrived. Trade increased. Violence decreased. And slowly, impossibly, the idea of humans and Orcs working together became less shocking and more normal. Vorgath disappeared into the northern territories. Rumors said he was gathering support, building his own power base, waiting for the right moment to challenge Gurza's leadership. Let him wait. They had work to do. On a clear morning 5 years after that day in the desert, Lucian stood in his workshop. It was a good workshop, full of tools, mechanisms, projects in various stages of completion. On the wall, mounted in a place of honor, was a lock. Not broken, remade, melted down and reforged into something new. A key. Intricate, beautiful, functional. The kind of key that opened not just doors but possibilities. Gurza entered without knocking. She never knocked. It was one of her more charming flaws. She looked at the key. "Is it finished?" "Just now. What do you think?" She picked it up, turned it over. "What does it open?" "Nothing yet. I thought we could decide together. Build a lock worthy of this key. Something that represents what we've built. Something that protects what matters while allowing the right people in." Another terrible metaphor. "I'm consistent if nothing else." She smiled, set the key down. There's a council meeting in an hour. 3 human villages want to discuss formal alliance. Vorgath's spies were spotted near the eastern border. And someone stole all the breakfast sausages from the kitchen. I suspect the apprentices, but have no proof. A normal day, then. A normal day. She paused at the door. Lucian? Yeah? Thank you. For staying. For helping. For being too stupid to know when to give up. That's what I'm here for. She left. Lucian picked up the key. Felt its weight. Its potential. 5 years ago, he'd been planning retirement. A shop. A cat. A boring life. Instead, he got this. An orc stronghold. A friend who was more than friend but couldn't be called that. A purpose that mattered more than gold. A future that was uncertain, dangerous, and impossible. And he wouldn't change a single thing. Some rewards aren't measured in gold. Some debts can't be paid with simple gestures. Some bonds transcend what laws account for. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is help break chains, both the metal kind and the kind we forge ourselves. The workshop door opened again. Gorza poked her head back in. Are you coming, or are you going to stand there philosophizing all morning? Can I do both? No. Lucian set down the key, followed her out into a day full of councils, spies, and stolen sausages. Into a life that was complicated and difficult, and absolutely nothing like he'd planned. Into a life that was exactly what he needed. Behind them, the key glinted in the workshop light, waiting for a lock that didn't exist yet, waiting to open doors that hadn't been built, waiting for a future that 2 impossible people were building one day at a time. And in the end, that was enough. Blood doesn't define family. Loyalty does. The strongest locks aren't those that can't be broken. They're the ones that protect what matters while allowing in those who deserve access. And sometimes the most prestigious reward isn't gold or power or glory. Sometimes it's the chance to build something impossible with someone who believes it's possible anyway. That's a reward worth crossing deserts for, worth facing hostile crowds for, worth staying for, every single time. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to our Orcbound Tales channel. Share your thoughts about impossible bonds, cross-species friendships, and what true honor really means. What reward would you ask for if you saved someone's life? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, the bravest warriors aren't those who never need help. They're the ones brave enough to accept it. Thank you for listening. Until next time.